In this video, we're going to look at trying to factor trinomials that have a coefficient in front of the square term. That coefficient is composite. So these are some of the hardest ones, or the most challenging problems to factor because of all the different possibilities that you could have in terms of the coefficients in our sets of parentheses for our binomials that multiply together. And I'm going to show you two ways to do this problem. One is by guessing and checking, and the other is by using an X method. All right, so option one, what we're trying to do is we're basically just trying to guess and check the factors that we need to have here. And we have a 6v squared. Now 6 is not prime. So the only thing I really know is that I have v times v. And since everything is at positive here, I know I'm going to have pluses here in for each one. And so what I have to do is I have to account for all the factors of 6 in terms of the numbers that could go in front of my v's. So 6 is 1 times 6, and it's 3 times 2. So I have that possibility. Now, I also have to account for the numbers that multiply together to make 12. And so the factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. And so I'm trying to find the magic combination. So I'm either going to have 1 times one of those factors of 12 plus 6 times one of those factors of 12, or I'm going to have 3 times one of those factors of 12 plus 2 times one of those factors of 12. And what I need is for that sum to equal 17. So I'm trying to find, well, which pair of numbers can I put where, either in this top line or bottom line, to add together here to make positive 17. And through the process of guessing and checking, what we're going to find is that actually none of these pairs here work with multiplying one by 1 and the other one by 6. The pair that does work is the pair 3 times 4. If I multiply the 3 by 3 and the 2 by 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 2 times 4 is 8, 9 plus 8 makes 17. So I found my pair. So what I know is that I'm going to have a 3v and a 2v. Now that 3v has to multiply to what's over here on the second part. So it has to multiply to a positive 3. And the 2v has to multiply to the second part of that first binomial, which has to be 4. So through guessing and checking, I could get this set of binomials. Now, this process can, so unless you're lucky and you get it right on the first try, you could possibly have to guess and check a lot of numbers, which is where this second option could be beneficial to some people. And I'm going to show it. So option 2 is to use the X method. So the X method is I am going to, the number on top is what you have to multiply to be. Well, I need to multiply the two numbers, the 6 and the 12 together. So 6 times 12 gives me positive 72. And I still need to add together to be that middle number of 17. And so I'm only looking at what times what makes positive 72 that adds up together to be 17. Well, 9 and 8 multiply together to be 72 that add together to be 17. We're going to take those numbers and we have to divide those numbers by the 6. So I got to divide both of these numbers by 6, and I have to change the sign. So it'd be negative 9 over 6 and negative 8 over 6. I'm going to set both of those little fractions equal to the variable my problem, which in this case is v. And reduce your fractions. So negative 9 over 6 is negative 3 over 2. And negative 8 over 6 is negative 4 over 3. And then we're going to multiply by the denominator, so that way it's not a fraction on both sides. We're going to do that for both of those. So I'm working both lines at the same time. So I'd have negative 3 is equal to 2v, and I'll have negative 4 is equal to 3v. And then we're going to move the number over so that way the left side is 0. So I got 0 is equal to 2v plus 3. And I got 0 is equal to 3v plus 4. Now, those two numbers on the right-hand side are our factors. And so our factored form would be 2v plus 3 times 3v plus 4. And you'll notice that that's the same thing that we got over here by just guessing and checking. All right, so new problem. I want to factor 10k squared minus 89k plus 72. And we're going to start by doing it the guess and check method. And if you prefer that one, and then we'll do the X method if you prefer that method. So I need to undo the multiplication. So I know I'm going to have a k and a k here in the front. I just got to figure out what the coefficients would be for those k's. They have to multiply together to make 10. Well, to make 10, I could have 1 and 10. So 1 times 10, or I could have 2 times 5. And I have to pick which ones those are. Now, whatever numbers I pick are going to have to multiply to the second part of both of these binomials here. So it'd be 1 times something plus 10 times something, or it's going to be 2 times something plus 5 times something that has to make the middle number of negative 89. Well, those somethings that I have to pick from are the numbers that multiply together to make 72. So 72, factors that make 72. You'll see there's kind of a long list of these. 1 and 72. You got 2 and 36. You got 3 and 24. 4 and 18. 6 and 12. And then you also have, I'm out of room, you're going to have 9 and 8. That multiply together to make 72. Now here's the thing that I do know, is that if you have a minus in the middle and a plus on the end, we're going to have minus and minus. So I'm going to have 2 negative numbers. And so you have to guess and check all of these pairs of numbers into those sets of parentheses and see which pair would work. And what you're going to find through the process of guessing and checking is that the pairs 1 and 10 and 9 and 8 will make negative 89. Where if I take and I multiply 1 by negative 9 and 10 by negative 8, they will add together to make that negative 89. So what I know is that I need to have a 1k and a 10k, and then I'm going to have that 1 multiplying to negative 9, and then the 10 has to multiply to the negative 8, and so we have our factored form. All right, option 2 is to do that X method. So since I have a number in front of the squared term, I'd have to multiply the 10 and the 72 together to get what my product is that I have to work for. So that's 720. And so the two numbers that multiply together to make 720 that add together to make negative 89. And so that's going to be the challenging part of this operation, is to figure out what those pairs of numbers are going to be. And what we're going to find is that negative 9 and negative 80 multiply together to make 720. When you combine them, they make negative 89. I need to adjust these numbers by dividing by 10 in both cases. So I'll have negative 9 over 10. And we'll have negative 80 that's got to be divided by 10. Now, the other part of this, when you're using the X method, you got to change the sign. So those are going to become positive, and I'm going to set them equal to the variable in my problem, which is k. Simplify the fractions that you can, so that I can only do the one on the right, so that gives me 8 is equal to k. We'll subtract that 8 over. I got 0 is equal to k minus 8. The fraction on the right, I'm going to multiply by the denominator since I can't simplify it any. 9 is equal to 10k. Subtract the 9 over. I got 0 is equal to 10k minus 9. And we have two factors here. So factored form of that would be 10k minus 9 times k minus 8, and that's the same thing we got by guessing and checking. All right, so we want to factor this next one, 8m squared minus 6m minus 5. We have the same situation here, is that I have a composite number in front. So the only thing I can figure out is I'm going to have m times m. So we start to break up the factors that make 8. So 1 times 8 and 2 times 4 will make the 8. So I got to figure out, all right, am I going to choose 1 and 8? Or am I going to choose 2 and 4 to create that middle number? Well, I need to add together to be negative 6. But what I have to multiply the 1 and the 8 by are the factors that make negative 5. So negative 5, or 5 itself, are just 1 and 5. So I'm fortunate from that standpoint that I'm either going to have a positive 1 and a negative 5, or a negative 1 and a positive 5. And I'm plugging in to see how, if it would work in this first set or this second set. And what we're going to find is the only way I can get negative 6 is I need to multiply the 2 by a 5, or negative 5, which would make negative 10, and the 4 by a positive 1, which is going to make positive 4. Negative 10 and positive 4 combine together to make negative 6. So we know that the numbers in front of the m's, I'm going to have a 2m, and I'm going to have a 4m. Now that 2m would multiply to the second number in the second parenthesis. The 4m would multiply to the second number in the first parenthesis, so I can see where my numbers go. So I got to have minus 5 here and plus 1 there, and there's our factored form. All right, so option 2 is to use this x method. So the number on the top here, that's my product number, would have to be the product of 8 times negative 5, so negative 40. And I would still need to add together to make my middle number of negative 6. And so we're looking strictly at this number and figure out what times what makes negative 40 and adds together to be negative 6. And the numbers that you're going to find that work here are going to be negative 10 and positive 4. So once I identify those numbers, I have to finish this process by adjusting or dividing those numbers by 8 in this case. So I got negative 10 over 8, and I got 4 over 8. Now you also have to change the sign so that 4 becomes negative and that 10 becomes positive. We set them equal to m, and then we reduce our fraction. So 10 over 8 becomes 5 over 4, and negative 4 over 8 becomes negative 1 over 2. Now that they're reduced, we're going to multiply by the denominators. So we'd have 5 is equal to 4m, and then we'd have negative 1 is equal to 2m, and move the numbers to the other side. So I'd subtract the 5 over, gives me 4m minus 5, add the 1 over on the right, so 2m plus 1. Those are the two expressions I have to multiply together to be in my factored form. So I'd have 4m minus 5, and I'd have 2m plus 1. All right, so I want to factor this problem, 10x squared minus 3x minus 18. And so I know that I have to have x times x to create the x squared. The numbers in front of the x have to create 10, so my options are 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. And so 1 times something plus 10 times something, or I'm going to have 2 times something plus 5 times something. And they're going to have to add together to equal negative 3 in this case. Now, because I have a minus in the middle and minus on the end, I still don't know what these two signs are. And so we have to figure that out. Well, going back to where we're at, we got to take the factors that make 18. Now, keep in mind, one of these numbers are going to be negative. So 18 is 1 times 18, or 2 times 9, or it's going to be 3 times 6. And I got to find the magic pair of numbers that are going to work. And what we're going to find is that 2 and 5 and 3 and 6 are going to work. Now I got to make one of these numbers negative. And so what you're going to wind up having is you're going to have 2 times 6 and 5 times negative 3. 6 times negative 3 make negative 18. 2 times 6 is 12. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Negative 15 plus 12 makes negative 3. So our factored form, we'd have a 2x and we'd have a 5x. Now that 2x has to multiply to what's in the other parenthesis, so that 2 has to multiply to a positive 6. That 5 has to multiply to a negative 3. And we get that factored form by guessing and checking. All right, option 2 is that x method. So I'd have my product number, in this case, would be 10 times negative 18. So I'd have to multiply together to be negative 180. And I would have to add together to be my number in the middle of negative 3. So what times what is negative 180? That adds together to be negative 3. And we're going to wind up seeing that those two numbers are going to be negative 15 and 12. And so once we identify those numbers, what we got to do is we have to do our adjustment. So I have to take the negative 15 and the 12 and divide it by that 10. And so we have negative 15 over 10, 12 over 10. Now we also have to change the sign so that 12 is negative, 15 becomes positive. We're going to set it equal to our variable, in this case x. Simplify the two fractions. So 15 over 10 makes 3 over 2. 12 over 10 makes negative 6 over 5. Now we multiply, because I can't simplify anymore and I still got fractions, multiply by the denominator of the fraction. So that first one we have 3 is equal to 2x. And then I'd multiply by the 5 on the fraction on the right. That gives me negative 6 is equal to 5x. And then move the number to the other side. So I'd subtract the 3 on the left. So that gives me 2x minus 3. Add the 6 on the right. That gives me 5x plus 6. And the right sides here are your two factors. And so our factors, 2x minus 3 and 5x plus 6. And you'll notice that that is the same set of factors that we got by doing plug and chug or guess and check.